Michelle Garner and Maralize Anderson are the hosts of the podcast Twinning, a podcast about the experience of having an identical twin. You can find links to Twinning in the description. So, guys, how many of you is too many?
I'll let Michelle field that one.
Well, we're quite content as we are, the two of us. I mean, I guess if there were 5 of us, we'd probably have a lot of fun with that too. So,
Right, but like, come on, there's got to be like an upper limit, right? Can there be like 90 of you, or like how many is going to start causing a problem?
Oh, of us, like as if we had multiple versions of ourselves?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I would say that we really like 2, because that's what we're used to.
It probably depend on other people, like how much we bother unto ourselves. We probably could handle a lot of us, but yeah, I mean, obviously, like our lived experience is the 2 of us, and that dynamic is very, I think, I don't know how to put it, but one-on-one is such a unique type of dynamic, right? I think it affords a particular type of intimacy and unity that is really only found between one and another, basically.
Oh, that's interesting, because it sounds almost like the fact that there are exactly 2 of you makes it more meaningful that there are 2 of you. Like if there was 90 of you, you'd kind of like, it kind of dilutes the experience of being identical with someone else, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's an interesting thing to think about. I think that there's an interesting kind of, Maralize and I, and then our relationship. So there's this kind of trifecta there. Mm-hmm. And that is only like, that's particular to 2 individuals having a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the podcast, you've got this podcast called Twinning, and I just like out of curiosity, it's just interesting to listen to, both as someone who maybe listens to way too many male-driven podcasts, number 1, and number 2, like someone who is a singleton, as you call it. What's kind of your motivation behind the podcast? Because it almost sounds like, you guys would talk regularly anyway, and you're like, well, we might as well record this. But what is your kind of motivations behind the podcast?
You want to take that, Lizzie?
Sure. I mean, we love the experience of being twins, and growing up, I think a lot of people had curiosity about that and would ask us questions about what it's like, and just an array of questions. But that was, knowing that that's an interest for some people. We don't assume that all people are interested by identical twins, certainly not. But we love being identical twins. And as Michelle said, it's actually just a time also for us to connect. So yeah, like you said, Samuel, we would regularly have conversations, and this just gives us a time to be intentional about that. And we actually have an imaginary world, which is hopefully somewhere we're going to get to in our podcast. And we wanted to have an avenue for sharing that with the world. So yes, that is going to be hopefully part of the future of our podcast. And we know it may be difficult sometimes because our voices are so similar, but it's just, it's a great outlet for us to connect with one another, to explore different ideas that we have, things that we've learned, things that we want to learn, and hopefully connect with other people out there who are interested on some of the topics that we're touching on.
Yeah, I feel like when I'm listening, at least, you guys kind of blend into the same person. It's almost like someone having a conversation with themselves. That's just because I can't perceive the like small differences between the 2 voices. But I'm actually quite interested in this imaginary world you're talking about. I mean, I know you say you're like waiting to reveal this, but I'm actually quite interested in what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, thank you, Samuel. We have this, we've had it for a long time, from our childhood. I mean, I want to say, like, we're pretty, there's a lot of imaginary play and creativity, I think, that we have in our relationship, and that is just expressed in how we communicate with each other. We'll be talking, and then suddenly we'll kind of like go into other voices and, be making some scene in our head, some scenario, and we flesh it out together and play with that idea and kind of embody it. It's almost like you're acting, sort of acting some sort of scene out in from our minds that we share together, that we develop together. And so, yeah, I mean, it's always been a part of our relationship. And I think that's another reason why we like doing the podcast and are doing it, because we like creating things, we like creating things. So it's fun to create together. Because that's just always something we do. We just end up in some imaginary situation that we're playing out. So yeah, I mean, our imaginary world is very, well, again, it's very funny and fun for us. And in this imaginary world, I'm actually a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and Maralize is a Dachshund dog, like a wiener dog.
Of course,
the reason why, naturally. And the reason why, like, what made our big bond, Samuel, was that we both have little arms.
Yes. So okay. So you forgive me for like completely shutting down.
Like, this is
like a lot to hear. This is a lot to process.
You're like, I was not anticipating this level of.
No, I really wasn't.
This level of weird.
Okay. Yeah, I can relate. I mean, as someone who has siblings, I mean, you know, you have like games and imaginary worlds and stuff like this, but yeah, being a T-Rex and a Dachshund is quite unique, and I'm interested to see where that goes. I don't really know where to even question you on that, but in terms of I really don't know.
We could just share a little more if you want.
I'm into. Please keep talking.
Well, so it's just funny when you said earlier, like, it seemed like you were, you know, connected regularly, and I mean, yeah, we did. I mean, Michelle and I love to be in touch with one another. We don't live in the same town. We live in the same state, so that's a blessing. But you know, we wish we lived in the same house. We were always very close, roommates. We talked about that in one of our podcasts, that, you know, we were roommates before then we became roommates growing up in our home, and then even to college we continued to be roommates. But you know, another way that we connected when we were living in the same area, living in the same room, we have regular conversations, of course, but also would jump in and out of this imaginary world. And I think both of us feel that there's a beautiful thing in being a child, and having a childlike spirit, and both of us feel very connected to that. And so being able to have this imaginary world that we kept up, like, there's many different schemas that we had as little children, but this one was the one that lasted the longest. And there's introduction of new characters over time. But our main character is Weensty. That's me, Weensty. She's Rexy, the T-Rex. That has not changed. Those characters have not changed. And so us connecting over the years, even especially when we moved further apart, you know, we would continue to keep up Winston and Rexy. And honestly, it's sometimes difficult to do that when you're not living in the same place, you know, and there's not as much time, you know, but then your inner being desires that childlikeness, and at least mine does, at least Michelle says. And so we want to incorporate more of that into our interactions with one another. Again, one of the reasons behind the podcast too is being able to channel that and explore it and enjoy it. So yeah, that's you know, our imaginary world. And as you said, like, many children have imaginary worlds or an imaginary friend or some schemas that they play when they're younger. It often doesn't carry on beyond childhood, because, you know, then you grow up and it's not necessarily okay, or, you know, everyone plays in their own way in different, you know, so it's not that people don't play as an adult, but it looks different in different, you know, it looks different than as a child. Well, maybe someone could argue that it doesn't look that different, but anyway, we have been able to keep it as much, very close to what it was like as children, and we love it. It's very invigorating to us, very invigorating, and yeah, life-giving.
That's interesting, because you mentioned there that thinking in a childlike way is important, even as an adult. Why do you think that is?
Well, personally, I think it's important because it stimulates curiosity. I think it also stimulates empathy, because what is empathy but like allowing yourself to sort of put yourself in another's shoes, really not just, you know, put your shoes within their shoes, as Daniel will say sometimes, but really take off your shoes, put on the other person's shoes. And I think that if we allow ourselves to kind of like let go of our like functional fixedness and just kind of purport or pretend, even, it allows us to actually develop curiosity. It allows us to develop empathy. And I think it also just like allows you to just be silly, you know, and not really, and remember that as grave as things can be in life, there's also so much joy and so much fun and so much wonder you know, around us. And so I think if you participate in like this practice, at least for us, it stimulates all of those wonderful outlooks that often children are so apt to have, and we can lose sight of over the years, with all of our functional fixedness and all of our, you know, just our almost being numb to the fact that there's all of these opportunities and potentials all around us all the time, you know. So the wonder element and the curiosity, and then also the empathy, right? Because you allow yourself to sort of be in a different headspace or point of view, you know. And also, like, I think there's a vulnerability there, because I mean, Samuel, when we're in this world, like we use voices, it's, you know, to some people that would be like possibly embarrassing, but for us, it's really fun. And we're like, okay, we'll just share it with the world. It's fine. Like we enjoy it so much that it's something that if somebody can, it's just even somebody can like get a smile out of it, or just have a laugh, or think that's funny, you know, then we're thankful for that. And I think too, sometimes the vulnerability is such a key aspect of like living a fuller life, you know, because if you're not able to be vulnerable or allow yourself to, you know, do something that actually like is in your heart and is just kind of bubbling forth, you know, there's something that kind of does get lost, I think, there, or sort of gets hindered and hampered, you know, where so there's such a worry for what will people think, or, you know, I have to be the certain way. And I think when you play and when you do this sort of out of the box sort of practice, it's a great way to sort of actually just enjoy and then also develop these aspects of, like I said, curiosity, empathy, wonder. And yeah, if we're not vulnerable, like we'll never learn anything either, you know, because in learning new things, you have to be able to admit like, oh, there's so much I don't know. There's so much I still haven't, I have yet to understand or even experience. So if we're not really vulnerable, we kind of put up so many hedges that can block us off from just further and deepening understanding, experiences, life, you know, itself. So I hope that kind of gives a good answer there, or at least some answer.
Yeah, I think this is definitely something that I would say I've fallen prey to, but also, you know, really bothers me, is that sort of cynical state of mind. It's like I can just imagine certain people I know, you know, the reaction to the description of this imaginary world with the T-Rex and the Dutch Hound and all that sort of stuff. But like you said, like that sort of vulnerability can be so simple but so kind of rewarding. Like whenever anyone's gone through like a transformative experience, they've always said how their mode of thinking has changed. And I think to have tools where you can look at something from a different perspective, whether, you know, like it's like admitting that you're vulnerable, for example, can help, it can get you out of like traps that I think, you know, again, it's come back to that like adult cynical way of thinking where, you know, people can get trapped in that for their whole lives. People can get trapped in a certain mental state and they get stuck there forever, and then they die, and that's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll just say really quick, this for me is a great analogy for vulnerability, and the power of it is like when you're learning a new language, right? You have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to sound, you know, possibly even sound childlike or childish, you know, like you're making mistakes or you're babbling, blah, blah, blah. And you do that though. Why? So you can learn a language. So you can actually have an access point to a culture. So you can experience other ways of life and thinking and living. And then you also have this incredible tool and resource of another language. So that, you know, vulnerability is a key aspect of learning and kind of extending one's horizons, I think. And, you know, those are great things because life will bring its times of despair, you know, and times when you have to get kind of creative to transform your sadness into growth, you know. And so I think that vulnerability comes in key there.
Yeah, I think learning a new language is a really good way of thinking about these things, because you know, people will say like, oh, what if I say something and someone doesn't understand me? It's like, well, you know, when you're learning a new language or trying to like use a new language, that is going to happen to you, and it's going to happen multiple times. And you have to grow as a person, you have to get over the fact that it's going to be painful as well. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, like you said, you've lived as roommates. Is that what are the benefits of having a doppelganger? Like, has one of you gone to work for someone else one day, or like?
Easy. All of our shenanigans of tricking people. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Actually do trick many people, and that's part of just our personalities of wanting to not be troublemakers. I mean, we just goody two shoes. You know, that's one of the words people used to describe us growing up. Honestly, like our superlative in high school, they gave to both of us and another male student, and it was teacher's pet. So if that says anything, I don't know. But it basically, we didn't really want to trick people. You know, we enjoyed the fact that people would confuse us on their own. So like, you know, we went to the same university here in the States. And, you know, if I was walking around and someone came up to me and be like, hey, Michelle, did you finish the homework? And I'd be like, you know what, I'm so sorry. I'm actually Maralize. Michelle has a twin sister, and they would just be like flabbergasted. And I just love that. Like, I love when that happened. It was hilarious. It was just absolutely hilarious. But the only time we switched like classes was when my Spanish teacher like prompted us to. She's like, I'll take the blame for it. You guys, I want you to switch classes because I want to trick the other Spanish teacher who we both had Spanish at the same time, but different teachers. So that was in middle school, I want to say. And yeah, we switched then, but we have not taken advantage of the fact that we can do that very often. It's just, I think we like to be you know, I don't know. We don't really like to mess with people too much, honestly. Like, it's just not our personality type, but I know many twins who have, and they enjoy it and it's funny. But yeah, I guess we don't like to make people feel like duped or something. I for the lack of a better way to explain it, that's just not how we are. But I think
our conscience, it's like, okay, yes. If I sent Maralize in to take a test for me or something like that, I just would just be like, oh, I know I'm lying. You know, I know I'm lying. Yeah. So I think we're both like that. It's like, oh no, we're not going to lie to anybody about this. We'll be straightforward.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting like personality thing, because I was thinking about it, and I've been told this in the past, like if there was more of me, if there was like 2 or 3, it would go like one of 2 ways. We'd either be like partners in crime and get up to all sorts of like weird stuff, or it'd be like Highlander, and there'd be like, you know, there can only be one, and we'd have to like fight each other to the death, basically. But I think maybe I just have a like weird sort of personality type in that way. But
that's not weird. It's not weird. It's just different.
Yeah. Right. So I was, you know, there's a constant use of the word singleton in your podcast, and I was just wondering if you guys consider yourself twin supremacists.
Oh, that's hilarious. The first time I used that word, I honestly felt like bad about it.
I felt bad about it. I felt bad about it.
I feel so judged.
I'm really sorry. I think I was the one who used it first, and I'm really sorry, Samuel. I did not in any way mean to make you feel bad, or anyone else for that matter, who is a person who was born just them. I don't know how, see, this is the reason why I use the word singleton. I think I was just recently pregnant at the time, like I had just given birth or something. And so like this whole mindset of like a singleton, that's when you fill out a form about like, I don't know, your pregnancy or something, which I think I probably had to do for this metabolic screening that I was doing for my baby. And, you know, it says like, was it a singleton or a double, a triple, meaning like how many fetuses were in your womb? So I don't know what else, how else would you describe it, Samuel? And I'm curious, like, instead of using the word twin and not twin, I mean, like, is there a better word? Because I definitely don't want to use the word singleton if it offends anybody. But simple answer to the question. We are not twin supremacists. We love people, all people.
Disavow.
Not just twins. Okay, we really love people. And honestly, I think it's not necessarily that we connect it's not like we connect better with twins than other people. Sometimes we connect better with twins than other people who are not twins. But it just depends on the personality of the twins, right? So, you know, we mentioned this quite a bit in our podcast that like our experience as identical twins is not, we don't assume that that's the experience of every other set of identical twins. And there's certainly a lot of identical twins who maybe have had difficulty and challenges in their relationship, or, you know, for other like conditioning factors, parents who have said like, oh, you should be individuals, be independent, and they've sort of driven them away from each other. And that's, you know, that's just life. That's, you know, the child can't control that. So yeah, we do not assume that our experience as identical twins is the same exact experience as others, but you know, yeah, we love being twins, but we love people. So we don't, triplets, if you're a triplet, or if you're a twin, or who's close to your twin sister or brother, or if you're a twin who's not close to your sister or brother, or if you're a single person, like not single as in relationship status, but singleton. I don't know. Yeah.
Samuel, what's your word? What should we say? What should we call the people who don't have a twin?
No, there needs to be a label, right? I just thought it was because it kept coming up, and I was kind of like, oh, I'm in the out group here listening to this podcast. I'm in the other group.
Maralize like genuinely felt really bad about the word. She was like, oh no, did I make people feel excluded? Yeah. That's not the intent at all.
But exclusion is fine. Okay, so here's an interesting question. No, because this is something that comes up came up a lot with my discussions with Javier Rivera, is the discussion of difference, right? And yeah. I'm kind of happy with difference. I have no problem with difference. I think it's actually a good thing that there are differences between people, because who wants to live in like a homogenized world where everything's the same, right? But do you think things would be better if everyone was a twin? If like human beings, they naturally produced twins every single time?
I feel like my gut reaction is I don't know. I guess I'm just, it's very hard for me to not think like, well, that's just not how it is. Like it's just, reality is that people are either born with a twin or not with a twin, in triplets or what. So it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I think our particular relationship and why our particular type of bond and why it's such a effervescent thing for us, like such a life-giving thing for us too, is also probably because of our personality types, where we just, we enjoy that bond. We enjoy the synchronicity we have, Maralize and I. So I don't know actually, but I think, it's funny because actually when I was listening to you and Javier's live, I'm trying to think, I think it was actually, oh no, I think you brought it up in both lives, Samuel, with Javier, that there was this point you make about how like you don't like when people become similar to each other, especially in marriage or like long-term relationships. You're like, I just don't like that. I think that's, and I get what you're saying. I really do, because I think there's something about being able to protect each other's differences in the Rilke type of sense that is important. It's really important. But I kind of thought that's interesting because maybe for identical twins like us, it's such a polar extreme of similarity that I was wondering from your personal perspective, is it like, oh my gosh, they're just like so alike. Is it as bothersome to see the alikeness in us as it is to see in like couples?
It bothers me because, again, like I said, listening to the podcast, I'm struggling to like know who's talking and who I'm listening to right now. Yeah. I think naturally it just kind of blends into one thing. It might irk me, but the only reason it does is because, like I said, maybe I'm a certain personality type where I would almost feel intimidated if there was two of me.
Yeah.
Because especially if like long lost twin brother turns up now. Oh my God, can you imagine?
He's gonna come through the door right now, Samuel.
Can you imagine how intimidated? Like it'd be like, oh, I'm being replaced here. But it's interesting because you mentioned how you've been roommates at college, and I would kind of, this thing came up in my head when I was listening to the podcast. Is Heidegger's concept of Geworfenheit, which is like thrownness, right? And it applies to the lower singletons and twins equally, but you're kind of just thrown into the world and you have to scrabble around and make something of it. And it's interesting because when it comes to your paths and decisions in life, do you feel like the presence of the other person has helped guide you? And in that respect, I'm also just interested, as much as you can share, how similar your paths have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea of having someone to guide you or someone to be alongside of you and sharing the experience of life, it for us has been an incredible asset. It's been an incredible blessing and a gift. And, I think that's for us. That's why if you had to go down this crazy hypothetical of, would the human race be better if we were all born twins? I don't think it would hurt. I think it might end up making the human race a bit better. But it's not to say, because because twins, we know twins that have had even harder struggles, who are not unified in their relationship, whose relationship isn't a gift to one another necessarily. But me and Michelle, we believe we live in a fallen world, that there is really some not so good things that happen in this life, in this physical life, and it's painful to see that, because a twin relationship should be a gift. But I think that having somebody to guide you, to be a partner with in life, for us has been an incredible blessing and asset. And now we have that also with our spouses. And I did not get to listen in for this chat with Javier, but I think, and a part of me thinks that I sort of like seeing tandem in relationships, not blending people becoming the same person. But there's a difference. I think they're mutually exclusive in my mind. There is a blending together where you can tell the person's just, catering, when you it's like middle school girl relationships sometimes, like the one girl is a little less dominant and she becomes like the dominant friend because that's the way she feels she can get get close to her and feel connected with her and feel accepted. That's not what I'm talking about. And what I see is there can be a tandem where in a marriage relationship or a committed, long-term committed relationship or a friendship, or in our case, a twinship, we are still our own people, but we have this tandem that comes about and it comes from this being aware of one another's needs, understanding them, understanding how to meet them. And I mean, this happens with me and my spouse. This happens with me and my spouse. This happens with me and my housemate, who's a twin as well. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I love seeing that. And I do see that in relationships around me. And I think that that's actually a sign of real maturity. And I say that it doesn't come with the sacrifice of losing who you are. But of course, when baby troubles, when there is a sacrifice of losing who that person is individually, that I think is a problem. That probably ends up being more like codependency and having some other issues mixed in. But I think that they're mutually exclusive, these two categories, people being able to live in tandem with one another and then melding together, that I don't think is a healthy thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was really interested when because you brought this up at some point, is the aspect of being deeply understood just by the biological fact that there is someone made up of the same biological stuff as you, right? And that could apply to siblings, but it's obviously brought to a fever pitch when there's an identical twin. And something else you sort of mentioned was that the other person's desires almost kind of line up with yours. And it sort of makes you feel more understood. How closely do your desires kind of match up?
Oh, that's interesting. So Samuel, we're going to be talking about desires and wants on our next episode, which is very exciting. So we'll get deeper into that subject on our next episode. But I think this is an interesting question, Samuel. I think that for us, there is a lot of overlap in terms of desires. I think I'd say so. And but there are some things that are different about Maralize and I, and a lot of times, like just between the two of us, if I had to say like who was a little bit more of a leader, I would say Maralize. And I was a little bit always kind of like our dad would travel in the East and things, and he brought back these two paintings one time, and I thought they were so indicative of like just the difference that there is between Maralize and I. Because the one painting, I don't know if you remember these, Maralize, but this one painting, was of a girl, it was a very beautiful, almost like lithograph, a girl in kind of Asian attire, sitting and doing her work at a table. And then that was for Maralize. My dad gave that to Maralize. And then my dad gave me the one where the girl is in the Asian attire and she's sort of like walking through the basically like the garden. There's like these stalks, basically corn stalks, and she's walking through them. And for me, I was like, oh, that's so fitting, because I'm a little bit more often sort of like abstraction and ideas. And that's probably why I ended up pursuing a lot more of that type of work, of philosophy and literature. I mean, I studied English literature, Spanish literature. That was my double major and at the university. And I think for Maralize, there's a bit more of a focus sometimes of like, okay, we need to get this done. And so let's get this done. And let's do, like, she was more kind of encouraging us to kind of sometimes get the things done that need to be done. And so I sometimes wonder, like, I think I was, in that way, I was often encouraged and sort of almost given like the structure for certain things, like even we studied abroad in Spain. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I was just the one doing that, I'm not sure I would have had the kind of like focus, and we need to do this paperwork, and we need to, like Maralize, she didn't ever make me, like, I wanted to go too. So I guess what I mean to say is, like, sometimes we have the same desires, but I think the way that we go about pursuing those desires is in the subtle way different, but then it can kind of be quite different now that we're like living apart, if that makes any sense. So anyways, I think that's a little bit of a difference between us. And for me, like, in some ways, I kind of like that, because I just kind of went along with what Maralize was doing, because it wasn't like I was sacrificing something I desired, because I wanted to do the things she was wanting to do too. But I just sort of had some motivation and somebody to kind of affirm me in that desire, and almost like somebody to hold my hand and say like, okay, come on, Michelle, let's go, And so I hope that dynamic is, I mean, I think, Lisa, you can speak to the dynamic as well, but I think that would be the clearest answer. I think we have similar desires and wants. I think the way we go about achieving those is a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think that was, going back to the question, Samuel, how similar have our experiences been in life? And I would say we definitely have differences, and I think that's something actually beautiful to discuss with people, because, especially for those who are like, oh, you're just the same person. And when people would say that growing up, it wasn't the most positive thing for us to hear that. It's one thing to confuse us and say, oh, you guys are so similar, I couldn't tell who was who. That's fun for us. But when someone sort of just like brushes us off, oh, you're the same person, it's not true. We're not the same people. And I think that, we definitely agree with Michelle. I mean, I'm a bit more decisive. I'm a little bit more type A. The interesting thing is, like, we have another sister in our family, an older sister and an older brother. And our older sister is very type A. And then I would say Michelle's a little more type B. I don't really like types, but here it is, because, we as humans are soon nuanced. I don't necessarily like to Myers-Briggs us all and just we're a series of letters, because we're more complex than that. But, for simplicity's sake, I'll just say that, Michelle's more type B, more carefree, less, structured. And I'm somewhere in the middle. Of my two siblings. But I think that being twins being identical twins, Michelle and I have had, as Michelle said, it's so many very similar desires and also very similar needs, and meeting those needs. Oh no, she's like, I feel very excluded right now.
Like, why am I a blur?
Yeah. I'm so glad. This is the most guests I've had on a podcast. This is great.
Oh, yay! Yay!
Must be the youngest podcaster ever.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll have her put down a nap very soon. But just to say that, the differences were not threatening in a sense. I don't know, like, the differences did not threaten still the shared preferences, shared desires, shared needs. They just sort of helped us get there, like Michelle was saying, they balanced one another. I don't know, I guess, Michelle, like she had mentioned with the study abroad, like I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get this going, let's get the paperwork filled out, and, let's get the references we need. And, I was a little bit more focused in that respect, but Michelle was, really wanted to go, and she loved the experience. We both did, and so, I think for me, Michelle, with what Michelle brings to me is, a reminder to be, patient sometimes in trials when I want to see things different, or change. Michelle's extremely patient, extremely finds the joy in even really difficult situations. And so I'm thankful for that. So, there are differences, and those differences just help encourage us. It's like, when they say, opposites attract, or people they're how do they say it? It's like they complement one another, in a long-term relationship or marriage, or even in a friendship, that, there's people who complement one another. And that's what I would say. It's like that tandem going on. It's not being who you are or melding into the other person, but it's a awareness and connectedness with one another. That's a beautiful thing to see in any relationship. And we've definitely had that in ours. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering also if if you guys are nature or nurture people, because you know, from a like blankly scientific perspective, it's like, well, okay, you're the same person, like you have the same genetic code, the same foundation, but it's very clear that you're, you know, like at least temperamentally different people, right? Which kind of, you know, challenges the view of like biological determinism, right? The fact that, you know, that you have this essence and it determines what you are. But it's very clear, like, you know, we'd say, okay, the DNA of someone, the genetic code that makes them up, makes them who they are. But it's very clearly not true, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a very good, I mean, that's why they do like twin studies and things like that, you know, because there's such a great case of like seeing nurture versus nature. How does that actually play out? Also, I want to say thank you, Lizzie, for your kind words. I was always very thankful for your leadership and like helping us to have some directionality. So we'd actually do stuff that was, you know, so fundamental and so great. So thank you, Lizzie, for that. And yeah, it definitely is kind of a, you know, you work together and the things that your strengths kind of, you make each other's strengths shine, you know. There's a lot of things that are the same about us, but the things that are different, I think those worked really well with us because it just really made for a good combination, and both of those strengths would shine in our relationship. And yeah, I think for the nurture nature question, I mean, it's very interesting because, you know, we, you know, born and raised in the same home, same parents, siblings, all of that's the same. Literally so much was the same school, you know, same church, same, all of that. So it is interesting because I think there's something that there's still something that there's almost like every individual has their own type of very, very, very unique culture to themselves, you know, and ours is very, very like there's such a crossover for the both of us, but there's still something that is a bit, obviously there are some distinct differences. I mean, and those play out in like some of our decisions as we got older, you know, when you have more decisions to make and when those decisions are more, have more at stake, you know, there's, you know, we started to make just, you know, just making different decisions. Even like, for example, probably one of the first big decisions that was different was like what to major in, you know, or like what to pursue for our futures, etc. But yeah, I think you know, I don't know. It's hard for me, probably maybe also just because to speak on like the technicalities of the science behind our biology and what's the same and what's different, nurture, nature. It's, you know, it's obviously just shows that people who have so much the same biologically don't end up just being these clones of each other, you know, they don't. It's often influenced by so many other factors, like almost in an epigenetic type of sense, right? There's these things that kind of influence you to have certain decisions. And it's always this sort of dialectic between you as yourself and then your environment, you know? So I'll say that. Lizzie, do you have anything to say on the nurture nature?
I would say, I mean, yeah, I think for us, we've got both going for us, right? So both nurture and nature are very similar. We're identical twins, we're not fraternal twins. But I think that, yeah, and that's why I think we'd like to invite the comments and feedback from other identical twins who have that nurture piece and nature piece the same, but who end up being different from one another, very different, or not really sharing that same value about their twin relationship as we do. I would say that, you know, certainly in our case, our nurture also included fostering of that twin relationship. So, you know, our mom loved the fact that we were twins, and she enjoyed seeing us dress alike. You know, she dressed us alike, and then eventually we ended up choosing to dress alike until high school. So we you know, we had that nature, that conditioning, that nurturing that would have facilitated a closer, more tight-knit twin relationship. And we know that that's not the case for every twin, you know, so the if you will, the nature of the nurturing, right? Then the nurturing for a set of twins, for example, we know a set of twins like this, for example, that the mom was very adamant about the twins do different activities, wear different things, they should be individuals. And they don't, it's not that they don't appreciate each other, but they don't have the same type of relationship with one another as twins because of what their mom's influence was on them, you know, because of some of these really the decisions that were made for them in very formative years of their lives. It doesn't mean that they can't circle back and appreciate each other and their twin relationship in a new way later on when they're more grown up, or further down the road. But it just wasn't what we observed, at least from what we saw in their life. So yeah, our nurture nature, the nature of our nurturing was that we had a very it was this tight-knit relationship, that this twin relationship that we love and adore and still enjoy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm a middle child basically, and naturally siblings tend to come in fairly quick succession. So I think naturally middle children are not the excitement of the first, but are also not the precious last one as well. So I think that the nurture of middle children is that you naturally become quite individualistic. And you become like quite having to sort of more individualistic, having to make your own way and that sort of thing without as much of a guide. And I don't know, I think I put quite a lot of stock in the nurture argument, because the majority, like, I think that you can kind of tell when you're talking to someone who's a single child, for example, because they're like the excitement of the first, and they're the most precious, and I don't know, I feel like I've been able to tell a lot of the time when that's been the case.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right, Samuel. It's something that kind of is evident in some of the things that they carry with them, how they express themselves, what do they think about, how do they think about themselves, etc. That's very fascinating. I've heard there's a book out there that talks about like these almost, again, I think it can be dangerous, very dangerous to have like, these set archetypes and letters for people, and here's your personality type, but there's this book about the order of children and how there are certain propensities that they have. And I've always been like, oh, that's very fascinating. Samuel, I want to loop back and just ask you something really quick. When you say something like, if I had a twin, we'd like kill each other, or we just get up to all sorts of shenanigans.
Yeah.
Do you think that's just a sheer element of like you value like your solitude, and it would just almost be like annoying to you to have somebody else? Or do you think like, I don't know. I mean, I think you're a really cool person. So like if you had another one of you, you'd be able to enjoy that coolness together, or like you'd enjoy that, that it's like, I'm getting to know Samuel, and my twin brother is getting to know me, and we're like learning more about ourselves and I don't know. So I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe it's just that we've had such a positive experience. It's hard for me to think about like, I mean, I'm just like, I thank God for Maralize. I love having her in my life. And it's such a, like Maralize has said, and I know we say it a lot, but it's just so true. And it's hard to really articulate it in its fullness, but we so appreciate it because it's such a sweet and special, unique type of relationship. And it's like this very, very, very cool experience of synchronicity. So I think for us, it's just like, oh, like, the idea of people not wanting that is fine. I mean, nobody should be forced to want anything that they wouldn't want. But I just think, I wonder if it's just a solitude aspect. I mean, do you think that may have something to do with it, Samuel?
Maybe. I think the biggest thing is that I kind of like being a rare commodity. I like there being just one of me, I feel like, it would dilute whatever I'm providing the world if there was two of me. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It was weird to imagine this alternate reality where we're on, Michelle's podcast and you're talking to the twins that are me. I don't know what that universe would look like, but
Yeah. No, absolutely. Can I just say something really quick about the podcast, Samuel? It's interesting because, you talk about our voices blending and stuff. And this is, we actually started this project by basically wanting to, well, it was a combination. We started to do videos, I guess, right around like after college or something where, honestly, like, I don't know, people are very kind to us. I don't know why people would say this, but people would watch us talking and stuff and they'd be like, you guys should have a show. We're like, thanks. That's so kind of you. Like maybe 3 people would tune in, but thank you. Like, that's so nice of you to say. I guess we're very energetic. And so like when we're together, it's just like hyper energy, Samuel. It's just like, some people are bothered by that. They're like, stop, like, just, what are you on? Just please quiet down. Like, stop yelling. And we're like, are we yelling? What really? We just thought we were talking. So it's a high energy and very, we're kind of feeding off of each other in what we talk about and how we engage with other people and how we ask them questions. And, it's all very fun. At least we have fun with it. And some people do, and some people don't, but people would tell us like, you should have a show. So we're like, well, that's very kind of you. So then we would just do these funny little, like we'd go to our parents' garage and like, make some funny video with each other. And then we kind of started to think like, well, we have our imaginary world, maybe we could like put that out there. But then we also we do like, even though I tend to abstract and think about ideas, Maralize loves to too. And she's very insightful and has some really great questions and really great thoughts. So then it's like, well, we could just talk about the experience of being twins ourselves. But the question is always like, our voices are very similar. And then if we go into our Winsty and Rexy world, our voices sound similar there. So there was definitely questions of like, how do we do this? Like, should we do Zoom? And I'm just wearing a T-Rex costume and Maralize is wearing like a wiener dog costume or something. So we've definitely had technical questions of how to make it work in putting whatever content we're putting out there to the world. I mean, we've also thought about like cartoons and drawings. So I don't know. We're all over the place, but we're like, we'll just start with this. We'll just start with Twinning, a podcast where we talk about our twin experience and we can go from there.
I think the costumes would be a great improvement. I feel like that's they need to get like a Patreon and crowdfund this. I feel like it would be success.
And by the way, Samuel, I think it would be lovely to have a twin of you. So, but that's okay. You can again. It's
you can sing your singleton. We're just kidding.
I can join the master race.
The master. It's funny, the word singleton, actually, like Javier had listened to our first episode and he was also like, oh wow, I felt like extremely called out as a singleton. Like,
yeah, me too. I had the same experience.
I'm the plebeian.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to say about that.
Oh man. But Samuel, you were saying about this nature nurture and being like the birth order, and I wonder that too sometimes, like if we were the firstborn in our family, would we have been different? You don't know. You just go. It's a hypothetical, but I think that a lot of it is just our nature. I think it's genetically how we are. I think maybe if we were born firstborn, maybe there would have been some differences, but maybe more in our family dynamic than just personally, individually, our own who we became and what our lives look like. But yeah, I think, and then to Michelle's point about the logistical issues, I think once we release Winsty and Rexy to the world, sort of share who they are with others through the podcast, we can sort of take it from there. I was listening to a podcast recently and I was also like, is there two people or just one person talking? I'm very confused. And there actually are some differences with our voices. It's hard to tell completely, especially if you don't know us that well. But, hopefully that we're using our names enough to where you can tell who's sort of chiming in, and then sort of enjoying that melding together, not melting us together, that in tandem that happens with what we share. And honestly, it really happens very naturally. We do have a roadmap for our podcast, but we have to let the spirit lead and like just go wherever we go. And that's Michelle said this last week, and I totally completely agree with her. It's like, I don't worry because I'm with Michelle. Michelle, and I know that we will be able to unpack something in such a way that leads to further conversation and further intrigue. And we're really excited for upcoming episodes, so definitely check it in. Shelley, you want to say the villainous phrase, because that was a really cool one.
Oh, you're so sweet.
This is where we're gonna work. But Samuel, we do have costumes for this one, but of course it's a podcast, so you won't see it, but it's like it's the Maleficent. Is that her name, Shelley? Maleficent.
Mm-hmm. I didn't actually realize there was like a Maleficent movie recently.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah, I did not know that. I really was just saying it because she's Aurora, like Sleeping Beauty, that she's the villain,
Yeah.
But the concept was that if we vilify our wants, we become villainous with our wants. And I think that's like, that is a really important thing to understand, because wants can be both, wants are things we just have as humans. And so it's a lot about it is the how, how are those things being met? How are those things being accomplished? And if you always just think of like, well, see, I had Maralize growing up to sort of affirm me in what I wanted, because we just naturally kind of in tandem in what we want, or even like the fact that we're hungry at the same time, we'd like a snack, just literally down to that. So I think that learning in this stage of life, I think it's just so fascinating to me, because it's almost like I have to learn how to want something for myself, and then also know how to go about that in a way that is clearly communicated. And also just to understand how, wants are not, they are something that kind of show, you kind of want to get curious with your wants, right? Like, why do I want this? What exactly is it about this that I want that has a representation of something else potentially? But if you always just sort of think like, bad, you have a want and that's not a good thing, then you suddenly still have those things in you. You're still you still have that in you, and you're not really finding a way to meet that or have it sort of be expressed in some way, even if it's just in some sort of imaginative, playful, creative way. Then like, as in like, I'm saying like writing something about it or whatever, if you're not finding some avenue for that, you can start to become actually very villainous with those ones. You'll still try to find you're kind of still going to want to find a way to meet that or to fulfill that or something. And then you start to actually become, I don't want to say tyrannical, but you can become destructive rather with your wants.
Mm-hmm. Because unity is a subject that comes up a lot with you guys, and there's kind of two sides to that coin, right? Is that you've got this amazing relationship with someone who's almost the same person as you, and you can kind of rely on to like not only be there for you, but like be a guide to your desires and those sorts of things. But I don't know, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. There's another side of that coin where, well, if you are a singleton, then you're kind of a free spirit. You have your own way to go, and if you're a twin, you might be constrained by what the other person is doing, perhaps. And I feel, I think that as human beings, and maybe twinning is a way to escape this, but I feel like we're always wearing costumes. Because, in my day job, someone might, know me as something or, have an impression of me. But then, one day you actually speak to them and they're like, and you're like, oh, I have a book and I write these things. And all of a sudden, poof, you're not Maleficent, but you're like a completely different person almost. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. Well, I mean, there's always elements that of every human person having their veils, right? Having their layers. I guess what came to mind when you were speaking, Samuel, was just this idea of like, well, with Maralize and I, it's almost like a place where you can kind of let your veils completely drop. But even between us, there are probably things that only Maralize really can know for herself about herself. And there are things maybe in myself that only I could really know the complete depth of or the extent of it. So, but I do think that well, I don't know, there's like kind of there could be like a pro and a con to it for us, because the benefit is that we have a practice in kind of complete transparency with each other. But there's also a way in which, you go outside of that context, and then it's difficult to, you don't just have the person who, can basically read your mind, who is speaking your same language. So then it can be very easy to retreat, like really, 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 really retreat into yourself. And that's a very interesting dynamic that can happen, because we talk about this a little bit in the podcast, and this idea of it being something that takes, I don't know, it's almost like getting used to the fact that like, oh, right, people are so different. Oh, right, people speak different languages, basically. I mean, I don't mean just like French and Chinese, like, this idea of the abstraction of language, and, oh, right, we're different. And just because we are doesn't mean you should just kind of like go like hightail it back into yourself and never show yourself, just because it will be different, and that just because it may be misunderstood. So I don't know. I think that's what I would want to speak on regarding that topic and our experience as twins and how that impacts that. Now for a person who is born as themselves with no twin, I wonder if it's like the norm is just to be like, I'm telling it to myself, because because you're like, I am this individual and nobody is like me. So I'm just going to stay in that place of veiledness. That's kind of my question that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just wondering, as again, you don't have to answer this if it's if there's some reason, but I'm kind of interested because you guys obviously you seem very close, you seem to get on really well, but what's the biggest argument you've ever had with each other? What's the biggest like falling out? Because like you said, you've been roommates before. There must have been some sort of falling out.
Michelle burnt the frozen pizza this one time. No, just kidding.
Oh gosh, that was.
Wait, what with the frozen pizza?
Michelle accidentally burnt the frozen pizza this one time.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I know.
So embarrassing. Like just ruined everything.
Well, at least you had a frisbee.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I had a frisbee.
Is that really the worst thing?
No. I was joking. But it was one that like stands out to me because there's been so few arguments with one another that like I don't know why. It was just like probably a perfect storm for like who knows, other factors going on, like, you know, some stress with school, hormones, who knows what. But like we had this little tiff with one another, and then we were like trying it. We're just like, okay, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That's how it happened whenever we'd have these like really petty sort of arguments. It's just like,
oh, so your argument was over who was the most apologetic.
well, no,
I get it.
That was the second
Probably.
layer. That was the second layer.
No, I'm sorry. No, it's actually like I think that it's really interesting to catch because Lizzie, I'm
well, because
going.
I mean, I could bring up like all the with my siblings. Jesus, like it sounds like a bloodbath compared to whatever you guys have been through. I wish mine was a frozen pizza.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we like being upset with each other for very long. So just kind of like work it out, you know. And it's funny, like even when we actually like, so basically one of like our first big crushes was the same person. And I can remember we had like a nickname for this person. We called him Apples because he had like rosy cheeks. And we basically we both basically looked at each other and we're like, but it was like this very tender moment of realizing like, wow, you have these big feelings for this person. And I had these big feelings for this person. I mean, we were like, I don't know what age we were. I don't know how old we were, maybe like 16 or something like this. And there was, I literally remember this, Samuel, because we were actually at this trip for our church, and it was like a church person, and we were in our little girls' quarter in our sleeping bags, and we're like looking at each other, talking to each other, that we would always do this, like lots of, you know, basically slumber party every night together, and we would just sort of say, like, talk to each other about different things. And I remember distinctly, Maralize, us basically saying at the same time that like, you can have him. So like, no, like. It was not like have him, you know what I'm talking about, but it's just like, go for it. You know, I don't want to kind of get in, you know, interrupt like you have. So it was just I don't know, to me, like those types of experiences just fascinate me endlessly with this sort of how do we navigate when, like, what if you want the same thing and you can't have the same thing because it's one thing, you know?
I just want to know what Apples is now.
Oh, Maralize, I brought up Apples.
I know. No, I heard. I was with you guys.
Okay,
my other daughters know. So we're doing a little bit of juggling on this side, but it's all good. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, no, I totally heard about Apples. No, but you know what, Samuel, we actually brought up one of our biggest conflicts has been, and we brought up in the podcast, one of our podcasts was we were talking about like having the courage to confront somebody. And we talked about how like we don't really usually feel like we need to have a lot of courage to talk to one another because, you know, like we've spoke on, we feel, you know, deeply understood and deeply accepted and loved by one another. And usually we're doing, you know, we're not making such deviant life choices from one another to where there is even a conflict. But I'll say that this one time there was a very big conflict. It was because, you know, I was basically caught up in a relationship that was not healthy. And I was really abandoning a lot of who I was in that relationship, or not abandoning. I maybe was melding. I was conforming. I was not holding true to convictions that I have in my heart. And Michelle had to approach me about that and call me out on a lot of things. Well, the main issue was me being in this relationship. So, you know, that was really hard for her. I mean, and that was like, honestly, that like is the example in my head, I think, of where, you know, we had a conflict, you know, where we had an issue with one another. And I didn't take it personally. I knew that she loves me and that she really was approaching me in love. to bring to light and allow me to accept and sort of point, it's like, see these things for what they were. And that's the biggest example I can think of in my head. Not the frozen pizza, though. That was one that does stand out to me for some reason. We've had very few petty arguments with one another, but that was a big one. And that took a lot of courage from Michelle. And I know she's not somebody who loves conflict. In the podcast, I talk about how it almost hurts her more than the other person who is being approached, because she deeply values harmony. She deeply values people feeling loved and accepted for who they are and what they're doing in life. And so I knew that it hurt her to talk to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It sounds like you're both very agreeable people. And by that, I mean, that comes with its upsides and downsides. Yeah. You get along well with people, but, like you were saying, Maralize, you can end up in a relationship that, you're just kind of agreeing to, and you don't see it for what it is. And then also on the other side, when it comes to confronting someone or bringing something up that's is painful, your agreeableness kind of gets in the way of that as well. But just on the topic of, this would be interesting as someone who doesn't have children from two mothers, is that something you said in episode, I think it was your second episode, is you said, again, I'm struggling to remember who said this out of you two, but it was like, how you speak to your child will be how they speak to themselves. And that, for a bunch of reasons, hit me quite hard, but I'm kind of just wondering if you could elaborate on that statement and what that means to you.
Yeah. So I did say that in the podcast. And
good to know.
I mean, not that it matters. Lizzie very easily could have said that too. But yeah, I mean, basically, like when we're children, we're absorbing so much, and oftentimes we're still learning what it means to like hear our own self, right? But what we end up mimicking, mirroring, just for the sake of learning how to talk, learning how to walk, is to watch and do, right? We watch and we do it. We watch it and when we do it, we see that with our children all the time. And a lot of times the first other a child ever has is their parents and their family, and it's almost like getting sort of tracks, like I'm talking like tapes, tape recordings or whatever. It's like these things that you hear over and over again. Well, you hear that and then you sort of say to yourself, you kind of internalize it. And so how you are spoken to and how you are approached and addressed is going to have a big factor in how you address yourself, that there might be some like psychology behind it and technical terms, and I'm not, very adequate at using or knowing, but that's just, to me, it's sort of intuitive in a sense, but also just by the fact that, again, children look and they see and they witness and they hear and then they repeat it back. Even the things that you think are naughty that they're doing or something that they, it's like, well, wait a second, let me think about myself. If my child's having a trouble with boundaries, like what boundaries am I having a hard time with? Because a lot of times there's just things that, and you don't have to want to become paranoid about it, because children also still make their own decisions, but they often are mirroring. They're reflecting what they see. They're reflecting what they hear to themselves. So it kind of gives them a framework of, if you're speaking to them a certain way, that gives them a framework for how they will speak to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to see what Maralize has to say about that, but it hit me hard because it's just like, well, I realized that every time I'm doing something that doesn't sit quite right with my conscience, the voice in my head is not me telling myself, it's my mother telling me off.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. But it's true. It is my mother telling me off.
Yeah, that's so interesting how we convert those internal voices from our, guardians, parents, influential figures in our lives to become our own, like internalizing and transforming those voices into our own. Before I was just going to say, if it's anything deep, Michelle has said it. If it's anything profound, Michelle.
Oh gosh, no, that's
no. It's Michelle. No, literally. That's not true.
This
See, this is the thing. This is
profound things.
important because this is the agreeableness coming through. Because if it was two of me, I would be like, no, it was me who said it. No, it was me who said it. You guys are the complete opposite of that. Complete opposite.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, but seriously. So anyway, I just thought I was just chuckling to myself while I was setting my daughter up with her thing, like that, you know, it will be very simple going forward for you, Samuel, on who's who, because the things that sound profound and meaningful are Michelle.
No. No. Maralize, you say incredibly profound things as well. I'm serious. I'm always just like, when I hear you.
Thank you, Shelley. I really appreciate that. But yeah, you know, I think this a concept of the child, that you know, and how a child's forming this inner voice for him or herself. And I would say that, you know, a child is going to take what you're saying and sort of like say it back to themselves. However, you know, a child also has their own will, and some children have very strong wills, and they don't end up, you know, speaking to themselves the way that actually you are speaking to them, if that makes sense. So I don't mean to disagree completely with you, Michelle. I do think that on the whole, children are, you're going to speak to themselves how you speak to them as a parent, for sure. That's you know, generally speaking, that's what's happening. But there is this willfulness in children, and it's a good thing. You know, and this ties back into, you know, the valuing and embracing and enjoying the difference, right? That we're not just meld into one another. So it's important that a child is understanding and figuring out who they are, what they have control over, what they can control. This is very important in their development. But I would just say that, you know, some children are more willful. And so, you know, a way that you've spoken to them, yes, they're going to speak that to themselves, but they're also going to sometimes mix in a little bit of their own nature, right? Their own, how they are wired genetically, how they're wired, how they think through things. And so I think just in a sense to, as a parent, not to take on that burden, because you can do your part as a loving parent. Or even if you extend it to other relationships, Samuel, you know, you said you're not a parent yourself, but, you know, even as a coworker, as a somebody maybe who is managing other people at work, or in some sort of friend type relationship or significant relationship with another person, you know, you can do your part to speak lovingly to somebody, empathetically, to sometimes need to call something out, but also do that in a instructional sort of way, in a way that instructs and guides a child in their development, or a coworker in his growth, or whatever, what have you. But then there's also going to be that person that you're not entirely and fully responsible for what they do with that. And I don't know, I guess I'd like to point that out, because I think sometimes as a parent, there's an incredible amount of weight there, or burden or responsibility. And, you know, if you know that you've done your job to approach your child in love, and that's, you know, discipline, and you know, from my perspective, is love. It's part of what you need to have to do as a parent to care for your child and to help them develop and mature. And so, you know, when you've done that part, then you can't really be concerned about the rest. But yeah, I think it's true though. You know, what are the first voices in your child's brain as they develop is your voice, right? So that obviously they're going to form their inner talk by what they hear about them from the outside world. And just, you know, I think it's interesting to think about how permeable, like how influenced, is it all the same level of influence, or do some children have a greater susceptibility to this influence than others? So anyway, that's just some food for thought there.
Yeah, and I think it was in the same episode, and I've been informed that it's probably Michelle who said this, because it's a deep statement.
Yeah, it is.
But
yes,
it was said that you know, it's important to allow someone else to feel their own music, right? And that, like you said, that goes beyond being a twin with someone. It goes into being a family member, goes into, you know, even being a colleague. Like you said, you can everyone can do that. It's like a universal. So yeah, I don't know, I've really enjoyed the podcast. I think it's been great so far. I would really like an episode on frozen pizza. I'd love to hear the whole story, maybe debate on that. I don't know. I want to see some more confrontation. You guys should confront each other a bit more.
Just straight duke it out on stuff. Yeah. Well, I think like I'll just say really quick. I agree with you, Lizzie. I think that's so important. And I think ultimately, like, I think just being aware that, oh, right, we have certain influences, but at the end of the day, like, I'm still an autonomous individual. I can make choices no matter what I've been told, right? I can still make my own choices, but I acknowledge maybe where it's coming from, but at the same time, I still am the one that's going to speak to myself, you know, so I can choose a different track. If this track's not working and it's basically driving me into the ground, or if I've been told like so many loving things, but still I choose a track that's negative toward myself, I can actually make a different decision and start to create habits that actually are the things I want to be speaking to myself, that then actually motivate me, encourage me. So yeah, there's definitely this idea of like awareness and just taking a minute to pause and reflect, but then also realizing your own agency. You know, so I'll say that too. And I think, you know, it'd be interesting because like in terms of our differences, you know, you were asking me like where do we have the most differences, and you know, if conflict, as you can see how our conflict goes, it's not very it doesn't really look like conflict. But I think it's funny that I did bring up this idea of like this first crush and apples, and then like, you know, that Maralize talking about like confronting her was about a relationship she was in, right? So I think it's interesting because we've been kind of it's almost like we've always been the other person to the other person, if that makes any sense. Almost like we were, it's hard to put this, don't take this the wrong way, but it's almost like we were married, you know? So then when going into like these other relationships with, you know, now our husbands, and, you know, when was in those younger years, I mean, we weren't really allowed to date till we were 16. So it wasn't really like, it's not like there was a big dating thing going on, but there were, you know, you start to meet other people, you start to have dates, you start to do that. And so I think that's probably the area, Samuel, where that's the biggest tension, right? Because then you start to make, you know, now you're bringing this other person into this kind of sacred relationship. And it's a very, 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 very interesting thing to wade through. And it's very unknown. And it's just a whole new experience for us. And, now you're also, when you choose a certain person for your life, then you're also now like you're in tandemness and your synchronization, and you're like in the sense of the good sense, not the like melding and losing your entire self, but the good sense of what Maralize was talking about is now with another human being that is not your twin sister. So it's just that's probably the area where I wouldn't say conflict, I wouldn't say we're duking it out, but I would say that that's probably the area of tension, because you might be making like even big life decisions or philosophical almost decisions for your life, or how you do things that might be different because of now who is your the other person to your other person, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like we need a podcast with Daniel, and you can have a argument. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Which is funny, like it's just interesting because I feel like our husbands, there are some fundamental things that are the same about them, but I think there are some things that are quite different about them too. So it's just interesting because like here we are, Samuel, like us are very, very similar, and then our husbands are not like twins to each other. Yes. You know, so that's just a whole new world. It's just so different.
I think we need a special where they talk to each other.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think it would be very interesting to have Jesse and Daniel speaking together. And, you know, I guess for me, what that speaks to is like this idea that there isn't really a soulmate out there for you. And that's like a whole different conversation. But I just believe that, you know, you could land up with different types of people, and you will be able to have a, you know, I don't know, I just don't really believe in that soulmate concept. You like sort of become one another's soulmates, but you're not like, oh, there's not just this one person that you're supposed to be, you know, the universe is signaling you towards this person through mystical signs and stuff. I don't know. I just don't find that I just don't think that's the truth. I think in our anecdotal experience of our, you know, spouses and our marriages, you know, we obviously married to, as we mentioned, not obviously, but we've talked about it. We're married to men who are very different, fundamentally very similar, but different in many, many ways. And so, you know, it sort of just shows you like, oh yeah, I mean, we're very, very, very similar. Michelle and I we were one person at one point, and we still hold to a lot of the same values, desires, preferences, needs. Yet, you know, we are married to two pretty different people. So
wonderful people, wonderful people, and that their differences is so unique and so wonderful to witness. It's just it's a whole new world, because you're incorporating that difference. Now it's like a sudden shock. I won't say shock, but it's very suddenly different that you're incorporating into something that had been so the same. So it's just, and that's great. It's great to be pushed in that direction. I think it's very, very much good for learning how to grow and expand beyond your capacity.
Oh yes, absolutely. Definitely a growth experience for sure. As is any marriage, really.
Because it's like, if the soulmate concept is like, wouldn't we have ended up with people more similar? You know what I mean? Like, I think this is an interesting determined thing. It's like, well, you're so similar, so wouldn't you have ended up with husbands that are like very, very similar? But yet we didn't, right?
But you know, I'm sure there are identical twins who have.
Yeah, sure.
Some identical twins just, make it a point to marry identical twins. So anywho, well, that's just, and we really do hope that people will chime in. Other twins will sort of speak to this as well, because, we love to hear about the experience of others as identical twins. And, we're just looking forward to that very much.
And we like the contributions from the singletons.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
You appreciate the contributions from the lesser classes. I like that very much. But no, just on the sort of idea that, oh, you two are genetically the same, therefore you must be married to the same person, is just like taking this scientism that I think we're currently in a malaise of to its extreme. It's not taking into account the entropy of the world. And the way I see it, I mean, you can take this however you want, but there's that old quote that, man makes plans and God laughs. And I wouldn't say I'm a professed believer in any specific religion, but there is such a thing as fate, right? And you might be genetic, you might even be literally the same, but you put someone in a different place at a different time and they meet a different person. And we have to kind of, I think as humans, we have to accept that, as much as we want to deny it and say, oh, we can make everything perfect and determined. That's kind of my view on it. So this has been really great. I've really enjoyed your podcast so far. I hope you keep going. Waiting for that guest episode with apples. It's going to be great.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow, that would be something.
That would be something else.
Yeah. Maybe that would be the most confrontational episode.
Perhaps, especially if we get his wife there too. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, because that would.
Samuel, it's really been a pleasure getting to know you. Thanks so much for taking the time to have me and Michelle join you and speak on this podcast. And we're just looking forward to more interesting conversations and sharing our imaginary world with everyone. And we just appreciate the insightful questions.
Very, very excited for the imaginary world. I think, as it might sound silly, but I think something's meaningful. It's, that's kind of the highest value. But I don't know. I feel like these conversations, they give it, serious sometimes. So there's a kind of tongue-in-cheek question I ask everyone. If you two were on death row, what would you have as your final meal?
Oh dear. On death row, final meal. Chicken a la king. Mommy's chicken a la king. And I haven't had it for a long time, but it's like and it's her version, so it's not, I don't even think you can look it up on Google and find a recipe. It's just Mommy's chicken a la king, which is like a creamy mushroom and chicken dish with rice.
Mm-hmm. It would be funny to see how do we said the same thing, 1, 2, 3, go. That would be a big thing people would do. They'd be like, let me ask, okay, I'm gonna ask you a question. Now you whisper in my ear and you whisper in this ear. And then is it the person would be so, oh, are they gonna say the same thing or not? I think that's so funny. That was always a fun experience. But, Lizzie, I do love Mommy's chicken a la king, that. But the thing that probably came to mind was boerewors. And mashed potatoes and green beans. We're South African, so this is that
was my other one, Shelley.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's boerewors. It's a type of sausage, basically, because we're South African, so our dad's side is Afrikaans. Yeah, and our mom's side's Portuguese. Yeah, but anyways, it's a type of it's a delicacy. It's a type of sausage, and then mashed potatoes and green beans and the gravy, just so good.